Hi there, I'm Mabel Whitaker. My sister once called me too country to show up at her best friend's millionaire wedding. What she didn't know is that I'm 10 times richer than every name on that guest list. But that night wasn't about money, it was about betrayal, hidden invitations, a stolen startup idea, and being erased from our mother's will like I never existed. They told the world I didn't belong. So how did I end up stealing the spotlight at their perfect event? And why did my sister turn pale when the groom called me the reason he made it? The call came just before sunset. I was in my kitchen in Austin, swirling tea leaves in a mason jar like I always did when I needed to think. The number on the screen was familiar but unexpected. It was Mrs. Ivy, our old neighbor from Lexington. "I found something in my mailbox," she said. "It's addressed to you. Cream-colored envelope. Looks fancy." She read the return address, and my stomach dropped. Travis Burkhead's firm. Not Charlene, not Carla, Travis. That invitation should have reached me weeks ago. Charlene must have intercepted it. I could already hear her voice mocking, "Why would you even want to come? It's not your scene." I thanked Mrs. Ivy, booked a flight, and packed light. I wasn't going there to be seen, I was going for myself. I landed in Charleston the next afternoon. Outside the airport, black SUVs waited for women in glittering heels. I took the shared shuttle. I wore a pale linen dress, my grandmother's wrap boxed carefully on my lap, and a pair of worn-out flats. The driver didn't notice me, neither did the other passengers. Bayview Orchid Hall was glowing in the southern heat, its tall white columns wrapped in orchids, music spilling gently through the open doors. I walked toward the entrance, invitation in hand. Before I could even say a word, the concierge, a woman named Marcia, looked me over and said flatly, "Staff uses the back." I smiled gently and replied, "I'm a guest." She frowned, clearly doubtful, and waved over Janice, the event planner. Janice glanced at her tablet, forced a tight smile, and said, "Would you mind waiting outside a moment, just to keep the line moving?" I stepped aside. A few minutes later, Charlene arrived, heels clicking like a metronome, voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Well, well," she said, smirking. "Didn't expect you to drag that country life all the way here." Behind her, Carla wrinkled her nose at the box in my hands. "Is that homemade jam or something?" she scoffed. One of the bridesmaids filmed the moment. Another stared at my shoes and snorted, "Those soles are crying." I didn't respond, just stood there and locked eyes with Charlene. Her gaze held for a moment, but her jaw tightened. I turned and walked back outside. I wasn't about to give them a scene. I sat near the fountain, the gift still balanced on my lap like it held something sacred. Through the open doors, I heard the sound of crystal glasses clinking, laughter floating on the evening air. For a moment, I considered leaving. But then I remembered, I didn't come here for them. I came for me. For the version of myself who always stayed quiet and walked away. Not tonight. The sky had faded into that dreamy in-between, somewhere between peach and purple. Garden lights buzzed on, casting a warm glow over the patio. I was still near the coat check window, still holding that box, still invisible, like whatever was in my hands wasn't worth opening. And that's when I saw her, Tammy Ridgway, one of Carla's bridesmaids, tanned, filtered, polished within an inch of her life. She stood across the courtyard, phone tilted toward me, voice low and laced with venom. Country girl returns, minus the glow-up. Fake laughter followed. Carmen and Wendy leaned into her screen, eyes sharp as needles. "Zoom in on those shoes," Carmen said, giggling. "They're crying for mercy," Wendy added. "What's in the box? Apple butter? Is that still a thing?" No one tagged me, but I felt the buzz. I wasn't a guest. I was content. And apparently, tonight's main attraction. I didn't move. Then Charlene appeared, wine glass in hand, face set in a version of concern that didn't fit her, crouching beside me like I was something fragile. "Hey, Mabe," she said, soft, using that name only when she wanted to sound sweet or innocent. "I didn't know you'd come," she added quickly, eyes flicking around like she needed witnesses. "You know how these people are. They see everything, then lower, more intimate. I just didn't want drama. You know how you get." She glanced down at the box on my lap, her fingertips brushing the twine like it might stain her dress. "Did you make this?" No warmth, no insult. Just quiet judgment, neatly wrapped and ribboned, like the rest of her life. I looked her straight in the eye. "You didn't want me here, but you didn't expect Travis to invite me himself." Her face flickered just for a second, and then she stood up fast, smoothing her dress like the truth had wrinkled it. "We all move on in our own way." The music shifted then, strings playing something slow and syrupy, and with it came a memory I thought I'd buried for good. Freshman year, I'd applied for the Stinton Fellowship, spent weeks on the essay, crafting every line like it was my lifeline. Then Charlene called, screaming with excitement. "They loved my essay," she said. "Can you believe it?" When she sent it for me to read, I froze. It was mine. Same images, same metaphors, same final line, but with her name on top. I said nothing. Thought silence was dignity, not anymore. Back in the courtyard, I stood. Tammy had her phone up, Instagram Live probably. I caught her gaze just long enough to make her flinch. I didn't wave, didn't smile, just walked past the lens like it wasn't even there. That alone seemed to rattle them. Behind me, someone whispered, "Who does she think she is?" I didn't look back, but I knew the answer. You'll find out. By the time the rehearsal dinner officially began, most guests had filtered inside. Laughter spilled from the grand ballroom, refined, excessive, hollow. I stayed outside longer than I should have, letting the humid air settle around me like armor. Eventually, I took the long path along the hedges toward the back terrace. That's when I saw it, the seating chart. It was mounted on an oversized canvas, framed in gold, written in calligraphy so ornate it dared you to squint. I scanned the rows. Table 1, reserved for family. Table 2, Travis's colleagues. Table 3, fashion influencers. On and on it went, tidy names scrolled like trophies. No Mabel. There was a single slot at table 6 labeled TBD, not even a courtesy placeholder, just an empty chair and an afterthought. I didn't walk inside to ask. I didn't need confirmation. This exclusion had been planned, just like the invite, just like everything else Charlene ever orchestrated. When control was on the line, she played to win. It reminded me of another list I'd been erased from. I was 26. Mom had just passed, and we were all still numb when the family gathered at Charlene's brownstone in Atlanta. Everyone was drinking Pinot and pretending grief was a fashion show. At some point, Charlene pulled me aside into the kitchen, same calm cruelty in her tone she used tonight. "You know, Mab, you shouldn't expect much. I mean, you lived your own life. You were never really part of the family plan. She didn't say you don't belong. She didn't have to." Weeks later, the lawyer read Mom's will. The house, the savings, even the vintage diamond brooch she used to tell me would be mine. Gone. All left to Charlene. I didn't fight it. I didn't protest. I packed my bag that afternoon and caught a red eye back to Austin. I rebuilt my life in silence. No drama, no spectacle. Just me and the clarity that blood ties don't guarantee decency. And now, as I stood outside that ballroom, the memory didn't sting like it used to. It just felt like a caution sign I'd finally learned to read. I leaned against the garden rail, peering through the arched windows as Charlene raised a flute of champagne. Carla was already on stage, laughing a bit too loudly at something whispered by someone richer, someone more important to her curated circle. It was all choreography, every gesture rehearsed, part of a brand that had no space for imperfections or family history that didn't sparkle. But I didn't feel jealous, not anymore. I felt solid. People had stolen things from me before, time, recognition, legacy, but they had never taken my core. I had let them win back then because I thought walking away made me noble. I thought silence was the higher road. But now I knew better. Silence had only taught them they could write me out of my own story. I glanced down at my phone. A new alert flashed across the top, severe thunderstorm warning for the morning. A laugh slipped from my lips before I could stop it. Let it rain. Let it all come down. The wind picked up, and the cicadas buzzed beneath the soft glow of the garden lights. I turned toward the entrance. Inside, guests were already taking their seats. Glasses clinked. Servers floated through the ballroom like dancers in a choreographed show. I stepped onto the path leading up to the double doors, the gift still cradled in my arms, posture straight. I didn't feel like a threat. I didn't even feel like a guest anymore, but someone else clearly thought otherwise. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice stopped me short. It was Marcia again. This time she didn't bother pretending. No smile, no warmth, just protocol. "I'm sorry, but your name still isn't on the list. We can't let unregistered guests pass this point." I reached calmly into my clutch and pulled out the envelope, the same cream-colored one, sealed with gold foil, sent directly from Travis's firm. I held it out without trembling. "This was sent directly from the groom's company," I said, clear, steady. She didn't touch it, didn't even glance at it. "I understand," she said, "but we were given very specific directives." As if on cue, Janice appeared, sweeping in from the side hall like a well-timed storm, tablet in hand. attitude sharpened to a blade. "Mabel Hembry?" she asked without looking up. I nodded once. "I'm going to be honest with you," she said, in that planner tone laced with polite dismissal. "We received a private request earlier this week asking that your place at dinner be withdrawn. The seating chart was finalized last night. We weren't told to expect you." I looked directly at her. "Let me guess. Private, meaning not from Travis." She didn't answer. Didn't have to. Charlene had been busy, cutting me out of every frame she couldn't control. "You're drawing attention," Janice said, eyes flicking behind me to a couple who had paused to watch. I met her stare without blinking. "Not as much as you think." She didn't reply, just tilted her head ever so slightly, and that was when I noticed the two security guards who had quietly flanked the corridor. Not aggressive, not rude, just positioned, a wall with matching ties. "May we escort you back to the outer gate?" one of them asked. I looked past them, into the ballroom where chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars mid-fall. Charlene was laughing beside Carla, hand on the bride's arm like she was royalty welcoming her subjects. I could have shouted something right then, called her out, torn the veil from her curated life. But that would have given her what she wanted, a scene, a scandal to twist into pity or spin into power. So instead, I nodded at the guards. "Lead the way." As we walked, I felt the murmurs rise behind me. "Who is she? Was that her sister? Is she crashing?" The phones came out again, subtle, shameless, but I kept walking. One foot, then the next, chin high, shoulders even, no tears, no tremble, only silence that roared louder than any outburst ever could. Outside, the air was thicker than before. The storm was close now. I stopped just before the outer gate and turned slightly, meeting Janice's eyes across the portico. "You should bill the bride for this," I called out, calm as ever. "The cost of what you just allowed won't show up on your balance sheet tonight, but tomorrow, that'll be a different story." I stepped to the welcome table, unwrapped the truth they never wanted to see, and gently placed the box down, still sealed, still full of meaning, still entirely mine. Beautiful, still mine. The twine bow hadn't moved. I turned from the welcome table and began walking toward the front gates. The estate lights cast long shadows across the gravel, and the air carried that electric pre-storm buzz like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. My heels scraped lightly against the stone as I reached into my purse to call a ride when I heard it. My name. Mabel. The voice hit harder than I expected. I paused. Turned. Travis Burkhead was jogging across the lawn in a tailored tuxedo, his tie skewed, hair slightly damp with sweat. His face looked like he hadn't blinked in minutes. "I didn't know you were here," he said breathlessly, slowing to a stop in front of me. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I held his gaze for a moment before answering. "Maybe ask the bride. And my sister." He ran a hand down his jaw, visibly shaken. "You weren't on the list. They told me you declined." "I never got the invitation," I said flatly. "It was sent to my childhood home, intentionally." His eyes widened. "I swear, Mabel, I had no idea." I let the silence settle over us, heavier than the air before a summer storm. And then he said it, what should have been said years ago. "You gave me everything when I had nothing." He looked down, almost ashamed. 7 years ago, when no one would even take my calls, you sent me a check for $15,000. I didn't ask. You didn't hesitate. You just believed in me. "You didn't owe me anything," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "I owe you everything," he said, louder now, voice cracking. "There's no cloud crown, no IPO, no wedding, nothing without that start." Behind us, the ballroom doors opened, light and music spilled across the lawn, heads turned, a few guests already had their phones up. Travis didn't lower his voice. "She's the reason I'm standing here," he said, pointing directly at me. "Not the investors, not Carla, her." Someone near the door gasped. And then I saw her, Carla, frozen in the doorway, one hand still clinging to a glass of wine. Her expression slid from confusion to disbelief to full-blown panic. I didn't move, but inside, something shifted. Charlene appeared next, storming down the steps with her heels snapping like gunfire against the stone. Her face flushed with something between fury and fear. "Travis, this isn't the time," she hissed, grabbing his elbow. "People are watching. You're embarrassing Carla." "You want to talk about embarrassment?" I said, finally turning to face her. "Try being erased from your own bloodline." Charlene's hand dropped away from Travis's arm like I'd burned her. "You're making a scene," she snapped. "Then let the scene begin," I replied. "You started it. Travis didn't budge. He just stood beside me, eyes forward, no apology in sight. And after a few tense seconds of Charlene frozen in place, he leaned over to me and whispered, "Come with me, just out back." "I think you need a breather." We cut through a hedged path around the ballroom and slipped out onto a quieter side terrace. Soft jazz played from the overhead speakers. A few guests were out there, sipping drinks or sneaking cigarettes, too polite or too smart to stare. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, and then I heard another voice. "Mabel?" I turned, stunned. There she was, Olivia Ray. We hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years, not since the last time she visited my old place in Austin, when I was still rebuilding from the ground up. Now she stood in front of me, sleek, polished, confident. Her name was everywhere lately: Vero Capital, IPOs, acquisitions, investor summits. I'd seen her tagged in Carla's LinkedIn brag posts. "What are you doing here?" she asked, eyes wide. "Wait, are you her? Mabel?" I nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I had no idea you were connected to all this. I thought you were off the grid." I straightened my spine. Not off the grid, just quiet. Then Olivia's voice dropped even lower, like she needed to hide the truth even as she spoke it. "You know that pitch Carla's been flaunting? This whole Revibe brand she built a few years ago?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence was enough. "It's yours," she said. "Or at least, it was," Olivia said, her voice tight with old guilt. "Remember that campus hackathon 2016? You showed us that blueprint over tacos." My pulse kicked. I remembered. The layered wellness app model, my model. I had shared it casually between bites of salsa and late-night exhaustion, never thinking it would leave that table. "She pitched it 2 years later as her own," Olivia added. "Filed the trademark." I pushed back when I realized, but they made me sign an NDA when they hired me. It's been eating me alive ever since. I blinked, the weight of it hitting not all at once, but in waves, clicks locking into place, quiet thefts, branded lies. But this time I wasn't alone. This time I had a witness. I wasn't going to let it slide just because it sparkled. "No more," I murmured. From inside, I could hear Carla's voice rising over a mic. Her toast, the grand finale, the performance. I turned to Olivia. "Can you walk with me?" She didn't hesitate, just nodded. We stepped into the ballroom as Carla raised her glass. Her smile was wide. Perfect. I walked calmly toward her, heels soft on velvet. She saw me, and the smile faltered. I didn't grab the mic. I didn't need to. I handed her an envelope, sealed, simple, final. "You'll want your lawyer to read that before Monday," I said, my tone calm, almost kind. Then I turned toward the crowd. They didn't understand yet, but they would. Carla clutched the envelope like it burned her fingers. The smile vanished, and in its place, something I'd never seen on her face before: uncertainty. The room hushed. The clinking stopped. Even the waitstaff froze mid-pour. All that remained was the soft hum of the air conditioning and the weight of 100 stairs. Then a voice cut through the tension, clear, direct. "Is it true?" A man from the media table, young, sharp, with horn-rimmed glasses and a blazer too casual for this venue, stood up. "Did Revibe steal a wellness patent?" The gasp that followed moved like dominoes. Carla opened her mouth, then closed it again, but Travis didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, voice louder and steadier than I'd ever heard it. "Mabel is the reason this company, this entire night exists," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "I didn't build it alone, none of us did, and some of you owe her far more than silence." I didn't flinch. I turned to Charlene. Her wineglass trembled slightly in her manicured hand. "You judged what I wore," I said, calm and clear, "what I brought, where I sat. But not one of you ever asked who I was." That's when the screen behind the stage blinked, flickered, then lit up, images cascading one after another. A school library ribbon cutting, a rural clinic opening, a Forbes headline, the anonymous investor behind 3 rising Fortune 100 techs. A hush fell, not from shock, but from dawning understanding. A quiet wave of awe moved through the room. Ruben must have triggered it remotely. He knew I wouldn't ask for the spotlight, but he also knew I'd earned the credits. I wasn't trying to steal their moment, I was just correcting the story. But even as they watched, my mind wasn't in the ballroom. It was in a cafeteria in Kentucky. I was 16, holding a first-place trophy from the state science fair. It was the first time I'd felt seen. Backstage, Mom had pulled me aside, her voice soft and final. Let Charlene accept the award, she said. She needs this more than you. You'll be fine. That was the first time I disappeared to make someone else comfortable. Now, I was done fading. As the murmurs swelled, Carla took a step back and bumped the mic, the screech breaking the trance. Charlene stepped forward, ever the fixer, ever the politician. This is getting out of hand, she muttered, shaking her head like she was scolding a child. Mabel, this isn't about you. I turned toward her, steady, unblinking. That's the only thing you've ever said that's true, I replied. A few guests shifted, a few more left. Someone near the back whispered, "She's the real one." I didn't chase applause. I never had. But I wasn't walking out this time. Tomorrow no one will remember their brand, but they'll remember my name. My name. That's what they'd remember. Carla tried to recover, let out a high, glassy laugh that rang too sharp, too rehearsed. It fell flat against the silence like a dropped dish in a chapel. I think we've all had enough drama for one night, she said, voice tight, the forced warmth cracking beneath pressure. From the back of the room, someone started clapping, slow, deliberate, then another, then another. But it wasn't for Carla. The applause wasn't celebration, it was mockery. A few people chuckled. Then it swelled, turned into laughter, not joyful but brutal. Carla's smile cracked. I saw the muscles twitch in her cheek as the weight of her curated image began to buckle under scrutiny. A man near the doors muttered just loud enough, "That's what happens when your empire is built on Instagram filters and borrowed brilliance." Phones lit up again. Sponsors left mid-meal. A champagne flute hit the floor near table 9 and shattered, but no one turned to look. Every eye was on Carla, watching her unravel. Charlene, always the fixer, surged forward and grabbed the mic. "Let's remember what this is," she said quickly, her PR instincts scrambling. A celebration of love this night wasn't meant to. I stepped closer. "You don't get to tell this story anymore," I said, low but unwavering. "Not here, not now." She froze. The room froze with her. "You call this love?" I asked, sweeping a glance across the scattered crowd, the half-empty tables, the open mouths, and averted eyes. "Then maybe you've never really seen it." Silence again. But this time it wasn't awe, it was discomfort. Raw and real. Janice, the planner, stepped onto the platform. Her voice was cool, steady, the voice of someone used to extinguishing fires, but this time she didn't even try. "I've organized over 200 weddings," she said. "This isn't love, this is ego. Performance. Spin." Then she turned to Carla and said what no one else had the guts to voice. "As of this moment, we're terminating our service contract. Your brand is no longer in alignment with our values." There were actual gasps now. Carla's face drained of color. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Charlene snapped, "You can't just walk out mid-event," but Janice wasn't listening. She handed her headset to an assistant, turned on her heels, and walked straight out the doors, leaving a silence louder than any mic drop. Carla stepped down from the stage. Her heels shook. Her face was ash. Charlene trailed behind her, whispering something fast and furious that got swallowed by the murmurs rising like a tide. Then the projection screen behind them lit up again. Ruben's work, no doubt. A clean Helvetica message blinked across the ballroom. Mabel Hembry is co-founder, lead investor, and the logistical partner responsible for tonight's venue. Any inquiries may be directed to her office. That was it. No grand reveal, no flash, just facts. Truth didn't need drama to land. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I just stood still as the world reset around me. They didn't invite me, but I showed up, and now I was staying. The ballroom lights dimmed behind me as I stepped into the humid Charleston night. A breeze rolled off the water, carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. I didn't rush. There was no reason to. The valet line was shorter now. Most of the guests had already slipped away, some red-faced, some whispering into their phones, all pretending they hadn't seen what they'd just seen. Travis caught up to me before I reached the curb. His tie was loose, jacket open, hair wild like he'd run a marathon inside his own life. "I wish it had been you beside me tonight," he said, voice low. I looked at him, not with anger, not with regret, but with finality. "It still can be," I said softly, "just not here, not like this." He nodded slowly, then stepped back into the glow of the porch lights without another word. The driver opened the car door, but before I got in, I turned to glance back once. Not at the people, not at the building, but at what I had reclaimed. At Charleston Airport, the news screens were already cycling headlines. "Influencer's wedding implodes amid lawsuit fraud allegations." PR exec Charlene Garlow removed from ethics committee following scandal. The Woman Behind the Curtain, Mabel Hembry, and The Quiet Rise. I didn't need to read them. I already knew. No one called me a guest anymore. They called me by name. Me, not Charlene, not Carla. But I didn't expect them to say it out loud. That kind of silence, I knew it well now. It was the silence people hold when they realize the story they believed wasn't theirs to tell. Somewhere over Louisiana, the plane humming steady beneath me, I listened to a voicemail from Reuben. "You stood tall, May," he said, voice low, gentle. Quiet power shifts the loudest rooms. When I arrived back in Austin, the sun was barely rising. The streets were still quiet. The world hadn't woken up yet, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was behind. I dropped my bag inside the doorway and walked straight to the quilt box, the one I'd carried across states for a moment that never came. Carefully, I peeled back the wrap. Inside was a story no one else knew how to read. It was stitched from pieces of shirts I'd worn during my first fundraisers, scraps from nights I stayed up planning and pitching, a strip from Mom's apron, the one she used to wear when she still called me her clever girl, a faded patch sewn with the first logo from the company I built from nothing but nerve and faith. In the center, tucked tight, was a swatch from Dad's old field jacket, the one he wore the year he passed, the year I learned how to keep going even when no one was clapping. I draped the quilt across the armchair by the window. It belonged there, right where the light hit in the morning. It wasn't for anyone else, just me. A monument to every step taken when no one was watching. I didn't seek revenge. This wasn't payback. It was reclamation. Even after everything, I didn't walk away from that wedding wanting revenge. What I wanted was clarity. What I needed was to reclaim what was mine and maybe, just maybe, to show anyone out there who's ever been told they weren't enough that they are. You are. You don't need to wear labels or shout in boardrooms to prove your worth. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the loudest truth. Family doesn't always mean fairness. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. But healing, that's personal. And it begins the moment you stop asking for permission to exist fully, without edits, without filters, without apologies. So if you've ever been laughed at, dismissed, pushed to the side, made to feel small in rooms you helped build, I hope you remember this. You don't need an invitation to take up space. Sometimes the most powerful move is just showing up, unapologetically, completely, authentically you, and now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? Did you ever prove them wrong, or are you still waiting for your moment? Let me know in the comments. If this story hit home for you, drop a 1 in the chat, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like this video, that's okay too. Just let me know why and where you watched it from. We grow through real talk and honest stories. That's how we heal. That's how we build something better. Want more stories that speak truth, that sit with you long after the screen goes black? Hit that subscribe button. Be part of the journey. Because I promise you the next story, it might just be yours.